Jane Burrows. Are there any more?
Yeah, sorry, Phil. We also have apologies from Nick Evans.
Yeah.
And Marianne Burrows will be late because of the COVID issue she's dealing with in school.
Okay.
And also Sean Taylor, who was the union representative of Schools Forum, has now left Schools Forum. And I'd like to welcome Paul Gillett, who has taken over from Sean to the Schools Forum.
Good, and I'd like to thank Sean in his absence for all the work he's done for Schools Forum during his time with us. Okay, because of people's schedules, I'm going to take item 3, which is the delegation report, before item 2. So item 3, I think that's you, Neil, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Phil. If you don't mind, I'm going to keep my camera off because I've got connectivity problems at the moment on the internet. So I'm just going to.
So I remember what you look like.
Yes. So this item 3 is the only item on the agenda which is for decision, and it's for decision by representatives of maintained schools only. So each year we consult with schools on dedelegating certain services back to the local authority. So for primary schools, there are 7 services, and for secondary schools, there are 3. Once dedelegation is undedelegated, we can't then dedelegate it back. So if Schools Forum decide that these services, any of these services will not be dedelegated, that is it, that they will not be provided through a dedelegation system to schools. A consultation took place between Monday 5th of July and 17th of September. As you can see, the one maintained secondary school responded, which is Alison, who is on Schools Forum, but I don't think she's in attendance yet. And then we had 48 maintained primary schools responded to the consultation, which represented nearly 38% of all maintained primary schools. Schools Forum need to be reminded that they need to take into the account the views of schools when voting for dedelegation, and the dedelegation has to be done by line. Larry, I see you have your hand up and you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt so early, but I should, for accuracy, I'm no longer chair at Wellesbourne and Tysoe Federation because we're now a multi-academy trust, and I'm the chair of trustees there. So for accuracy and voting, I'm also the chair at Shotbury Primary School. So I guess I can still cover in that role and vote as it's a maintained school.
Yes, Larry, you can, because you were elected as a maintained primary school governor. I think it would be appropriate that you will be allowed to vote on the dedelegation. So if anybody's got any questions on the paper before we move on to the voting, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Okay, anybody? All right, let's go ahead with the vote then. So the first one is the free school meals eligibility. So this is the 9 maintained primary schools, and the
10 including Larry now.
Okay. Oh yes, right. Okay.
Larry's jumped ship.
Right. So the result of the consultation was 100% yes. So would those people like to indicate in favour, all those in favour of that dedelegation, please?
Right. Yeah, so I've 8 out of 10 in favour.
Okay. Put your hands down, please. And those against? Are there any against? Is that a vote against, Martin?
And Larry, is yours an against hand, or was it in favour?
Right. Okay.
Sorry, I forgot to take it down. No, I'm in favour.
Okay. And are there any abstentions?
Well, I'm abstaining because I'm not a voting member, so I'm just here for Sybil, that's all.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's carried anyway, I think.
Yes. If you could
Okay,
take
the
your
next
hand,
one
Martin.
is English as an additional language, and that was 2/3 in favour in the consultation. So all those in favour, please.
And Larry's put his hand up as well, so I make that 8 out of 10 again.
Okay. All right. Is anyone voting against? Okay.
No.
All right. Well, that's carried. The third one is trade union facility time, and that was 80% for in the consultation. All those in favour of that, please show.
Yeah, 9 in favour.
Okay.
All 10.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. Sorry, I've lost my screen.
School improvement.
Yeah, school improvement was the next one, and that was 90-10.
Elizabeth, can you come out for a second?
Okay, has everyone voted?
I have 9.
Okay, that's certainly carried. The next one is Gypsy and Romany Travellers, which was 70-30 on the consultation. If you're not speaking, can you turn your mics off, please, so we don't get the noise? Okay, everyone voted?
So that's 7 in favour I've got.
Okay. That's carried. Specialist SEND support services. That was 96% for in the consultation.
Yeah, that's 10.
Okay, thank you. Medical referral of employees, again 96% for in the consultation.
And again, that's 10.
Okay, thank you.
So if we could just, people could lower their hands and we can move on to Alison as the only representative maintained secondary schools. And if Phil, if you could ask her the same question on voting on the 3 areas.
Right, okay. Right, the first one then, Alison, is free school meals eligibility.
Yeah.
Okay. And the next one is English as an additional language. Okay, thank you. Trade union facility time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I apologise for this being a bit tedious, but there's no other way around it really, but thank you very much.
Okay, is that it?
That is it, Phil.
Okay, thank you. So item 2 is voting on actions from the last meeting. Those have been circulated. You can access the video recording of the meeting. Are we happy that that's a true and fair record? And are there any matters of discussion and matters arising from that people want to raise? Okay. Right. Item 4 then is early years and childcare 30 hours entitlements. The place efficiency. I think that's Mandy, is it?
Mandy Latham doesn't appear to be in the meeting, Phil. So can we move on to the next agenda item?
Okay. Item 5 is new free schools, which is the report from council yesterday. Who's doing that?
It's Byrne.
Okay, welcome, Byrne. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a verbal update for Schools Forum on where we are with new free schools in the county at the moment. So at full council on Tuesday 28th, this Tuesday just gone, council approved funding of £49 million for a new all-through school in the South Leamington Warwick area to meet future new school places in that area. We're expecting that school to open from September 2023. So a bit of work to do there to get it open on time. And the previously approved free school in the north of Rugby, known as the Griffin School, is expected to open again in September 2023, following several years of delays on the housing developers' side. So that school's not opened. Both of those schools will have an impact on our growth fund, DSU budget Schools Forum approves, in the 2022-23 year onwards, and will be included in the next forecast and report that you should receive in January coming. Other free schools in the county, we have a DFE Wave free school approved in the north of Nuneaton, and that's currently got an in-principle approval. But as it's a DFE Wave school, all the funding of that is entirely the DFE's responsibility, so no impact on the growth funding.
Is that Higham Lane 2?
That's the one, yep. Higham Lane North, I think, is the one they're calling it, yeah. And that's it for the time being. There will be more free schools, more new schools in the county every few years, but that's what we've got for now. Sorry, I can see some hands up, but I can't see the names.
Two hands up. Yeah, Tony Dix. Tony.
Yeah, based on the performance of the current free school in Rugby, the one you've just mentioned, the new one, is that the one? Could you give me the location and the name of it?
So we have doesn't have a name at the moment. The one that's just been approved will be a new all-through school. South Leamington, South Warwick, depending on how you look at the map or how you view the area. The presumption competition to find the academy trust to run that school will be launched in the autumn term, with a view to have the actual academy trust appointed in the new year, maybe around March time. Free schools, just for clarification, they're called free schools. They essentially operate as academies. There's very little difference once they're open. It's the process of opening that makes them a free school.
Right. So, in terms of the funding that's being thrown at them, which is considerable, what's the due diligence in terms of ensuring they're going to be a decent provider?
So that's done through the bidding process to secure the trust, and the capital funding is the delivery, and the capital funding is done by the local authority. So we will actually build the school, and then the provider is selected alongside that to run the school as part of the bidding process.
So it's not like other free schools where they take over an existing building and change it all around?
No. So this will be a purpose-built school, designed to DFE standards.
Right.
And the trust will come in and run the school, and the building will be the building.
Okay. So, and what plans are there to do some sort of work with some of the free schools, which are now, well, the one in Rugby particularly, is struggling? So.
Sure. I think from that side, from the education standard side, I can't comment on that idea with the sufficiency and the data, the more hard side of school. That would be something the question of my school improvement colleagues. But I do know that school recently just received a good offset inspection and judgment recently, so it's on the up.
The one in Rugby?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not the information that's currently available. Right. Okay.
Thank you very much. Someone else has got the hand up, but I can't see who it is. Sorry.
It's Alison.
Alison, sorry.
Hello. Right. Yes, I just wondered what the age range was for the Griffin School, please.
Primary school, 1 form entry primary.
Okay, thank you.
With a nursery attached.
Yeah, and the inspection report for the free school came out, I think, this week, which is why it's possibly not in the public domain at the moment, but it should go on the Ofsted website very soon, I would imagine.
Thanks, Alison.
Great, thank you. Larry.
I might have missed that, but what's the location of the new free school? You said South Warwickshire. Is there anything more specific?
South Leamington, South Warwick. If those of you know Leamington, Warwick, just south of Warwick Gates housing estate, just there on the Tatchbrook Road as you go out towards Bishop's Tatchbrook.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there any more questions or comments for Bern? Thank you, Bern, for your update.
No problem. Thank you all. Chair.
Item 6 is the DSG monitoring report. Brian Smith, I think this is yours, isn't it?
Good afternoon, all. Yes, it's my item. Thank you, Phil. It's the we've done this again in the usual formats. I've got a hand up already, 2 hands. Is that?
I think they might be left over from last time.
Okay.
Carry on, Brian. I'm sure.
I'll carry on. I'll ignore hands in a moment. Thank you. Yeah, it's the usual format. So and all the figures are based on the forecast that managers provided at the end of August, what we call period 5. So the usual format is table 1 shows you the allocation, the original allocation of the total DSG, and the changes that have occurred between then and now to give you the latest allocation. Those changes are mostly around academy recoupment, but also to do with the uplift and certain technical adjustments to the high needs block. Such as import and export of children, this sort of thing, as well as the increase, some slight increases in funding that came in from the update of the high needs block. So that gives you 241,641,000, which we're forecasting against. So section 2 is the actual, excuse me, is the actual positions that people are forecasted against. Obviously, there's the one big thing that stands out there is the high needs block overspend, which you all know about. The other areas are relatively minor compared with the size of the overall DSG. If we go into section 3 here, all this down here is a bit, excuse me, is a bit more of the analysis, more detailed analysis and narrative about the various variances, about the variances to the various blocks. So we've got the schools block notated there, and then the high needs block. The high needs block, there's 2 or 3 large areas which you've probably noted. The almost 4 million overspend from the provision of the independent special provision, and then also the 3.5 million of future year savings, which is towards the bottom of page 3, which is about the 3rd bullet point up from the bottom of that page. There are then some areas which are offsetting that overspend, notably the 1.4 million top-up funding on special schools, as well as the £1 million, just over £1 million on alternative provision. So that's all those. Early years block, small underspend. Central service block, relatively small. Relatively small underspend to the whole DSG, but that's mostly technical adjustments because of not use the contingency for the historic pension contributions, potential borrowing, and the employer's liability. We've also added in here, as usual, the Appendix A, which is just literally a line by line of how various managers manage the various budgets of the DSG by cost centre in effect. So you've got the full detail there about the size of the budget, what the forecast is, and what the variance is. I've gone through that very quickly. Are there any specific questions which we can either answer now or I can get back to you on?
Okay, Alison, is your hand up for this?
Nope.
Yes, yes, it was briefly.
Okay.
Brief question. Just looking at the alternative provision, I just don't understand what it's saying. I'm not sure it's written quite as it's meant. Could you just clarify what it's actually saying?
I think what it's saying is that the actual cost has come down. The overall cost has come down because the actual packages are less costly in terms of pounds and pence.
No, it's not. It's the new challenge on behaviours of exclusions and placements that, although have meant an increase in packages, but I'm just struggling with the new challenge on behaviours of exclusions and placements.
I think I'll have to hand you over to Dwayne on that area.
Yeah, she's dying to come in.
From an educationist point of view rather than a finance point of view.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, Alison, yeah, everybody. I think what we're trying to say there, with the fair access protocol in place now, what we're seeing is a turnaround of the children far quicker back into school places on exclusion. So what was happening previously in terms of the budget pressures is that when children were being excluded from schools, they were kept and held in AP for quite a long period of time. And the cost of AP provision at £100, £200 a day, £250 a day was quite significant to the budget pressure. So by implementing a robust fair access protocol, the children out of school for the 6th day of education, we put it in, but that turnaround period is far quicker, so they got less time in AP, and that has reduced the cost significantly.
Okay, thank you. That does. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne.
Nikki.
Hiya. Just my question is into 3.5 in the early years block. It says the overspend. This is due to an increase in staffing costs for the service to include accurate calculations for SEN allowances. So is that staffing to the IDS team?
No, this will be within one of the early years teams or a couple of the early years teams.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Sorry, Nikki, going back, the IDS early years team is actually funded
it's in the
high needs block.
That's what I thought. I didn't understand it right. Okay, because we've not been. I'm just thinking about the staff. I guess we haven't been in schools given that information about those new roles within the early years team.
Can I call you, Brian?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
Feel free.
So I think what it is, Nikki, in terms of, so the early years teams are funded from the early years block.
Yes.
The staffing is funded from the early years block. Yep. What is funded from the high needs block is the actual inclusion grant.
Yes.
And what we've seen is a higher pressure on that inclusion grant from the high needs block. So that is putting the pressure there for us. And in terms of the funding, it's not so much staffing, but it's how we calculate the staffing and how we calculate in terms of the teacher pay scales and things like that, and inclusion of that. So I think the on cost have changed as well in terms of that. So two different budgets, but both under pressure.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dwayne. Larry.
It's probably a pretty obvious question, but when we look back at the history of the high needs, and I'm familiar with the good work that Dwayne and her team are doing at the moment, is there anything on the horizon where we can expect a re-look at the funding that's put aside from for high needs? Because high needs in schools are escalating at a fairly rapid rate as far as I'm aware. You know, a lot of schools now have got over 20-25% even in rural areas. So, and Dwayne and her team are working hard, but is there anything on the horizon that's going to come forward that's going to help us with this? Because this one's not going to go away, is it?
No, I mean, it's almost a couple of strands to this. Is one of obviously the great work that Dwayne and her change program is doing, which is actually trying to target and reduce the from a financial point of view the costs by transforming the service. Then there's also obviously we're yet to hear what's going to come through in the comprehensive spending review in later this year, as well as the local government settlement, which could have effect. We've had notification in July of next year's high needs block, and Warwickshire did have, and nationally there was a large increase, a planned large increase, anything up to sort of 10%. Warwickshire was at the floor because there was a floor and a ceiling process, and Warwickshire's actually got 8% more for the historic funding factors, which is about 70%, about 7/8 of the high needs block funding. So there is some there. Unfortunately, you know, although every sort of regional meeting of finance people where we have a DFE rep there, they just won't comment past this comprehensive spending review once it's announced, so they won't comment. The plan that Dwayne's got and the recovery plan, we've actually put in a modest rise in because we don't want to overstate it, and we'll be reviewing that once the comprehensive spending review is announced. We've got various scenarios going from 2% up to again 8%. It's really what the comprehensive spending review will the underlying messages that will come through from that. We'll have to feed that in.
Is there like a consolidated approach across counties? Because I understand what Warwickshire are doing, because I sit on some of the working groups and Dwayne's groups for the funding. But it just seems to me that this problem's never going to go away. And Dwayne can correct me if I'm wrong, but from where I sit, the problem's escalating, and it's going to be a continuous. So is there a view being put to government that's consolidated across the educational side, how big this problem is and how it's going to get worse and not better?
Before Dwayne comes in, I'll just say that I know that there were lobbying by local government associations. There's also lobbying by various like the F40 group. So these are going ahead, and obviously the ministers have said they will be listened to for the comprehensive spending review, but we're yet to see any outcome of that. Dwayne, do you want to comment further?
Yeah, I'll add to that as well. What we are waiting for, Larry, is the outcome of the green paper from the SEND review itself, in terms of what that's going to produce. Now, whether that's going to be producing any additional funding is questionable, because that will be done through the funding review. But I'm hopeful that we might see some changes in the legislative framework. But that's not going to be, we're not going to feel that impact if that is the case for a long time yet. And that comes around needs assessment and the ambiguity around some of the code of practice. So, we can only work with what we got and spend within our means. And at the moment, we're not doing that. We are spending over what we got coming in. And that is a fact. So, but to put in context, and the last time I looked at the data across the country, well, across England, I think the last from this was from the Guardian. I think it was about 94% of local authorities are absolutely overspent on this budget.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Martin Davies, please.
Yeah, just on 2.2, is it anticipated that the authority will actually have to prepare a recovery plan?
At the moment, the DFE aren't being mandating any of this.
Right.
They've given us a format that we can use if we want to, and we have looked at that. The one thing I do know is that they have a list of every local authority, and we are league tabled in effect by the forecasted overspend, but that is the forecasted overspend of the whole of the DSG, and Warwickshire is nowhere near the top of that list.
Right.
If it was just the high needs block, we'd be quite a way up that list. And they have targeted certain authorities for direct intervention with a bit of a sweetener with promise of extra funding if they make certain changes. We're yet to hear what the next round of those will be. I can't say whether we will be on that list, but I can't think we'd be on anywhere near the top of that list at the moment, because from what I've talked to other colleagues, their DSG problems are even more severe from where we are, and they haven't even started the process that Dwayne started in the change programme.
So we are among many friends, if I could put it that way, in terms of the situation.
Yeah,
Many.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's across the board. I mean, there are very exceptional authorities who have no problems, or at the moment have no problems on their high needs block, but they are even forecasting in the future to have problems.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any more comments and questions on that, please? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 7, which is the Send and Inclusion Change Programme. And this is you, Dwayne, is it?
Yes, I'm going to do this in 2 parts. I'd like to sort of update colleagues first and foremost of the recent Ofsted inspection and some of the key findings that the local area inspection for Send threw up, and then Ross is going to join me in terms of looking at the change programme and the impact of the change programme that we've had in the past year. So I've just got a little presentation because it's easier for me to read off this, and I'm going to share my screen for colleagues now. So for colleagues that are unaware, we had a CQC Ofsted local area inspection. I want to start really by thanking everybody that was involved, because there was lots of people involved in this inspection framework. And what I'm going to do is look at the key findings from the Ofsted CQC letter and just outline briefly, what are the next steps for colleagues as we go through this process. Oops, sorry. Okay, so just to confirm and just to outline, give you a bit of background, between the week of the 12th to the 16th of July, we had a local area inspection under the Ofsted and CQC framework. And this looked at 3 main areas within Warwickshire. And that was the first area on how we identify children and young people's needs in Warwickshire, how we assess children and young people's needs in Warwickshire, and what the outcomes for our children and young people look like. There is a 4th hidden question in the inspection framework, and that concentrates very much on leadership. Is the right leaders in place to deliver what is required to be delivered? The inspection team, I think it was a 5 or 6, and there were 3 from HMI, Ofsted, 3 from K Quality Commission, because this inspection looked across a framework of education, health and social care. It was a week-long inspection, as I said, and they spoke to many people. They collected lots of data, and which we had to upload on the portal, as well as speaking to health professionals, families, school leaders, social care, and obviously local authority officers. The final report was published on Thursday, so last week we published it on Thursday as a county, the 23rd of September at 1 o'clock, and it was on the Ofsted CQC website on Friday, the 24th. There were several areas in the report, and I'd welcome anybody to sort of have a look at the letter. They really commended what we were doing as a county. And I think for me, in terms of being on a relatively short journey in Warwickshire, and the staff and the commitment from staff and colleagues that I've had over the last 18 months, you know, is truly commendable. However, it did highlight several significant weaknesses within the letter. I want to start really with the strengths and what they saw as the strength, and you know, this is highlighted in the letter, and really was the commitment of leaders to improve outcomes for children and young people with special educational needs in Warwickshire. And as I said, this wasn't leaders just from the local authority, this is leaders across the area, including our schools, early years settings, post-16, as well as health colleagues and social care colleagues. When we looked at the educational attainment across all key stage phases, whilst that was quite spiky, what we did know is that by the time our children and young people leave key stage 4, educational attainment tend to be good. Attendance rates was very, very good. And I think the most significant thing I think that was actually in the comments was, you know, the dramatic decrease and around our exclusions, and that was deemed as, you know, exceptionally good. They were very complimentary about leaders, and they said that we understood ourselves well, and we understood our strengths and our weaknesses because of the accurate, well-informed and detailed self-evaluation across the local area that had been undertaken. And they were very complimentary about the Send and Inclusion Change programme, and they basically said that leaders had developed this programme and started to implement an ambitious change programme, which identified really what needed to change and why it needed to change, and that they were beginning to see the impact of that programme. However, what they did identify were significant weaknesses in the areas of the following: the waiting times for ASD, and that looks at early intervention as well in terms of how we early identifying. And in terms of that, it wasn't just the waiting times, and we know the waiting times are a national issue across many counties. I think what they were looking for from Warwickshire partners, health partners, is actually the detailed plan in how we're going to address this. It looked at the relationship between parents and carers, and really how we communicate and co-produce at a strategic level. I mean, 18 months ago, when I joined, the state of parent and carers are decommissioned, and we reconstituted the Parent and Carer Forum. And obviously that is not embedded, you know, we were not at that formal sort of embedded phase and using them as strategically as we should be. I think one of the things that was quite loud, and I must say, is that the children spoke. Children and families of Warwickshire spoke during this inspection, and one of the things that came from many children, and when inspectors spoke to them, is how felt they'd been let down by the school system, and how they felt, and this was evident in the data, that many children were being placed in special schools when their needs should have been adequately met in the mainstream school. And that came from leaders as well, from our school leaders that were interviewed. They felt that they didn't have the skills, knowledge and understanding, and that came to the second part of it, is by placing our children in special schools, the inspectors felt that the school, mainstream school, no longer had the skills, knowledge and understanding to be able to meet the needs of children, some children with special educational needs and disabilities. And they felt that the uptake of training from our mainstream schools was not evident. The final thing they felt was a significant weakness was the online offer, and the online offer is a statutory offer that all authorities must have in place. And at the time of the inspection, that the offer that was up, they felt was not fit for purpose. And that links back to the communication. What they felt was with families was actually families didn't know where to go for support, and they did not know enough about the local offer. So what are the next steps for us as a local authority? I'm meeting with the Department for Education and NHS England tomorrow, as well as senior leaders across education, health and social care. We will have to produce what we call a written statement of action, and excuse me, that will also be co-produced with our parent care voice in Warwickshire. We will be monitored as a county, not just a council, but as a county across education, health and social care over the next 18 months to make sure the significant weaknesses that were identified are being addressed. We have started and we will continue to move forward as we move forward. Developing the written statement of action is to engage with our children, young people and their families, and we will co-produce this document in line with our health colleagues as well as our social care colleagues. Regular updates will be provided, and I will provide regular updates through the school forum, through Cabinet, as well as through the Send and Inclusion Change programme and other areas we have to communicate. As always, as I finish the sort of brief update, I'm happy to answer any questions before I move on to Ross. We do have a Send Local Area Inspection email address, which if colleagues want to sort of email and ask questions, I can assure you we go back to every question that comes to there. That's my email address. If you want to get hold of me personally and have a conversation or get involved in any way you can, I'd be more than happy to have that conversation. There's a few local offer websites we have available, and that is one around, Send and what we've been doing the last 18 months, and also actually a website dedicated to Send and Inclusion Change programme, which, any about co-production, I know colleagues here in the school forum are already involved in that. So I'm going to sort of stop sharing my screen for a moment to see if there's any colleagues that have any questions they wish to ask.
Questions or comments, please? Martin.
Yeah, I mean, what we've heard is mostly fine. There are obviously some major issues. It seems to me, though, and we've seen this before in the forum, and in fact, there are references in other papers today, there is this tension, large tension, between trying to ensure that more and more pupils with various kinds of disadvantage are located and held in mainstream, which is as an ideal, splendid. But the issue is how this can be managed with the pressure on management teams. The training reference has been just made, and I think we need to keep in mind there's a substantial tension between these two aims.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's something I sort of want to sort of just bring in is the training and the inclusion, because this is Ofsted's findings, and some of the children absolutely said they went to special schools and they shouldn't have. They should have stayed in their mainstream schools. There is a need for workforce development with schools, and I think there is a way, and I'm looking at all my services and how we can deliver that, and there is possibly a way where we can work as a school forum to support our schools to release staff, to enable staff to take that training. But school leaders spoke as well during the Ofsted inspections, and they actually said themselves they didn't feel they had the skills, knowledge and understanding to meet the children's needs. And we know that when a child enters into specialist provision, the cost does go up. So, the data is telling us we do have too many children in our special schools and not enough in our mainstream. So it's not an easy thing to fix, but I think there is a solution in how we can fix it. I'm hoping to bring that to the next schools forum.
Thank you.
Wayne, what's your thought about flexibility between the two? Is it ever the case that a child might need, say, a term in a special school for a special setting for a sort of process of intensive support and then go back into mainstream? Does that happen?
It doesn't happen, but I believe firmly in a revolving door, Phil. I absolutely do. I don't think, there are times when a child needs additional support. I mean, even if a child has had trauma because of family has passed away, there's a time you put intervention in. And the part of the assess plan do review is always looking at that intervention. I mean, what evidence does suggest is that actually when we place a child in special school, they're very unlikely to revolve back into a mainstream school, you know, which is really disappointing. I think that some of the issues we have, you know, is that the welcome parents get with 4-year-old children starting our schools, that they're told they can't go there because they've got special needs. And actually, to even go there, they'll need an education, health and care plan. And then when you get that plan, you consult with the schools, then they turn around and say they can't meet need. I think the families, what they said was it was traumatize the children and the families, actually, their journey here. But we should absolutely have that intervention in place, absolutely. And it should always be a revolving door. Yeah, that's my.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Faye Padfield, please.
Hi, thank you. Yes, building on everything that's been said. So in terms of the trauma that is created in children in mainstream settings because of a lack of support and understanding within that, how, you know, the trial one changing the conversation is being consistently pushed back, and it just seems counterintuitive. If you look at how behavioural expectations have changed over the years, and you have the government behaviours are promoting silent corridors and complete compliance and really strict uniform codes and policies and like that, these environments are hostile for children with additional needs, and unqualified and unsupported professionals are inadvertently making that worse. And I think if we keep doing what we've always done, we'll keep getting what we've always got, and that's an escalation of needs and an escalation of costs and an escalation of children who are traumatised into adulthood, school refusal and so on. Is this not a point in time to challenge the way that things have always been done? Keep throwing money at the same thing, when actually, is there a fundamental lack of understanding, not just within education, but within healthcare, within social care, within society as a whole, of specifically neurodevelopmental conditions? Because they're the biggest issue that we're facing in county.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said neurodevelopmental, because, you know, I think in terms of neurodevelopmental, that is the largest prevalence we have in Warwickshire, as it is in many other counties. But we can't forget, you know, there are children that are blind, there are young children
course, yeah,
that are deaf and like got Down syndrome, and you know, I think that you can't look at this in isolation, because actually it's, you have to see it, and I'm privileged to be in a job where I do see it from the whole perspective. So, you know, if our early identification is not right, and that's not happening, and we're, you know, our 2-year-old uptake of places in early years, which is a good way of identifying children, is not happening, and that's not good. By the time the children get to school, they've probably not been in any provision. Then they hit in school without the right support at the right time, without the right strategies. And actually, by the time it's getting to the place, actually we're in crisis, families are in crisis, schools and children in crisis. The model I want to try and, well, I've been working on since I've been here 18 months, is early intervention, getting that support in at the right time, making sure that education, health and social care, we are all working together as one, which is at the heart of the code of practice. So, you know, when we're doing our maternity checks and a child has been identified through in utero that has Down syndrome, how is that information getting to me? How is it coming into the local authority? But it's not just one fix all. I think in terms of being a school leader myself and inclusion, I think that is from the head, from the governors. And I think once you've got an inclusive governing body, once you've got an inclusive head, then the whole school becomes inclusive, because that is a core belief for what that head wants to drive that school through. I have had challenging conversations with lots of heads since I've been here, because I do have many phone calls from heads saying, I can't have this child, but the school down the road can take them, because they do it far better than me. And I've gone in and said, well, can I offer you to do support to get where you need to be with the other head? And I do think it is, if we all in the school culture have it, you know, if we all take our fair hit across the board, then we will have a truly inclusive Warwickshire. It's not an easy problem to fix, because there's going to be a cultural shift as well.
Can I just,
just sort of
back on that, really, I suppose. So obviously physical disabilities are much more easily identifiable, and you know the issues with a lot of SEMH is undiagnosed autism, ADHD, dyspraxia, dyslexia. You know, it is the neurodevelopmental conditions, and I appreciate what you're saying about early identification, but there is no practitioner, unless a child is severely impacted by those things, that could identify an autistic ADHD child at the age of 2. And there is no medical, you know, they won't be seen by paediatricians until the age of 6 and considered and screened for things like ADHD. So it's kind of flawed in that regard. It's not a simple, but it's the tie-in again with the healthcare, really. How are we working to improve that?
Yeah, I think, Alison, first of all, we have to have a need-led, not a diagnostic-led.
Yeah.
So if we have a diagnostic-led system, then we can only give support to children, young people that have a diagnosis. Then actually you're missing a large cohort of children. Yeah. If we go to a system where the needs are prevalent, therefore we meet that need of the child, yeah, then actually you probably wouldn't need a diagnosis to get the support in place. And that's what I said about the ASD waiting times. Yes, you go waiting times for ASD, and actually lots of teachers, lots of professionals know that child got ASD without that diagnosis. So why aren't we putting in the strategies with or without that diagnosis for that child?
The competing needs of the school. It's the competing needs of the school against the needs of the children, which you're seeing time and time again, that actually without a diagnosis, children's behaviours, which are challenging, are not taken seriously and not seen as needs. They are seen as behaviour, and therefore behaviour strategies are being put in place rather than support.
So it does not come down to the workforce development. So,
yes. So when are we doing that?
Yeah. So I go back to the original question. We need to invest in the work, and I'm happy to. I mean, within my portfolio, over 300 staff, and they're talented. I'm more, you know, and that's why I want the Schools Forum to support me and to say, how can we support schools to release the staff to undertake this training? So I'll make that training free of charge, but we've got to work together because it's all our issue, actually, absolutely.
And ensuring that the training that's delivered is actually fit for purpose. I've had conversations with staff who have undertaken some of the training, and their awareness is some children have autism, and that is about as far as they've prepared to learn on that course. So it is a holistic issue. It's about ensuring the training is fit for purpose, that the staff are able to take it, that it's accessible to schools, and that, you know, mainstream approaches aren't actually inadvertently hostile and damaging.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, I want to finish this sort of with you, Faye. There are some schools out there that are absolutely doing an amazing job as well, and we
there are. Oh, absolutely, and I've been very fortunate to actually experience some of those. So, yes, I agree.
Thank you. Alison Davis, please.
Thank you. Dwayne, a couple of things. Firstly, you mentioned earlier on about the possibility of students being dual registered. About students going and spending like a term in special, and you made the point once they're in, they very rarely come out, which I agree with entirely. But I do think there's probably more value in dual registration. We've only ever, I think, since I've been at Avon Valley over the last 4 years, had one child that was dual registered, and that was a success. So seeing as we have over 30 children, I think, at the moment with EHC plans in our school, on an annual basis, you know, but only 1 in 14 years that's been dual registered. I think that's something that could be explored more because it works successfully. You also, I was listening to you talking the other day, last week, when you were talking through the report. And one of the things you said was there are many children in special school that should be in mainstream, but you also acknowledged there are a small number of children in mainstream that should be in special. And I would say across the about 30 that we've got at the moment, there are probably 2 of them that I would say actually shouldn't be in mainstream. And it's, of course, driven by parents' wishes. And I think that there can sometimes be more work done potentially about talking to parents about the fact that being in a special school isn't a bad thing, because these 2 children are not going to have good outcomes. One of them is now in care in Shropshire and actually not attending school on a day-to-day basis. If he'd gone into a special school at an appropriate time, he could have been on a very different pathway. So I think there's some work there to do with parents about how it might be a more appropriate choice and more positive. And if that was done in a dual registration scenario, that might help them to feel more secure that they're not putting their child into a special school forever, and let's do some dual working, and maybe there's a better way forwards. And my final point is about divergence of pathways, and I know you're talking a lot about early intervention and identifying need early and putting in the appropriate provision, but I think there just needs to be some recognition that often the response I will sometimes get is they've been fine in primary, they should be fine in secondary. And there is a divergence that becomes more apparent, not just at the start of secondary, but also as they become more hormonal, that pathway between what can be managed in mainstream and what can't actually starts to spread. And there are some children who will manage okay at primary, but by secondary age really can't cope in a mainstream school.
No, and Alison's definitely sort of there, sorry, but I don't agree with. And I think a few things I think we need to look at. And I mean, you know, at the end of the day, the code of practice and the legislation puts families at the centre, and the voice of that family is quite loud.
Yes.
And there's a presumption in law that every child attends a mainstream school. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If it's code of practice, that's where we go. There has in my career, and you know, I am a school leader and now I'm in the authority, I've had to make a decision with a child where a parent wanted mainstream and I did not think that was in the best interest of the child. You know, and we were taken to tribunal over that, and they, you know, the outcome of that was what it was. Unfortunately, that was one case out of many I've gone to tribunal over, and 95% of the times the judge will find in the favour of parents. And don't say that, yeah, they will. So for me, it's how can we then support the school to maintain that placement? And you're right. I mean, when I look at, there's a few things I think are fundamentally missing in Warwickshire, and that is the pathways for children. So that's looking at resource provisions, and I am speaking to the Regional Schools Commissioner, because when I look at the secondary schools, you know, 35 out of 36 are academies. So how do we encourage our school leaders to actually take on board that we need resource provision, which offers that halfway house between your mainstream high level of support. So, you know, them conversations are going on now, and I know Ross is writing the strategy around that. Also, I think, you know, it is about actually having that conversation, and our panel processes are far tighter than what they were now than when I joined. So it's evidence-based, because what we want to make sure is that school leaders and SENCOs have absolutely done what is required to do for our children, and that's through the graduated approach and through the assess plan do review. And I think a bit like the fair access protocol, and you know, children with special needs are the only children in our society that we have to consult the schools to take. We don't do it for any other. We don't say you've got English additional language, so will you take this child? And it's certainly something I've raised with the DFE, and I will continue to raise. Why should we consult? For me, there should be a presumption children go to school, and you evidence why you can't meet need once you've got them, not the other way around. Just say I'm not taking them in the first place. But I do think there's somewhere amongst school leaders where you need that peer-to-peer sort of conversations yourselves, because actually there are some schools that do it really well and have a disproportionate amount of children, high level of needs now because they do it well, with other schools don't. And you need as school leaders challenge one another as well, and we all need to work together to make it a fairer system for our children. Yeah. So and in terms of you saying dual registration, it is something I think we need to look at. But actually, is where the responsibility will always be on that host school, and you will always be accountable for that child as that host school. I have worked with dual registration in other authorities where they've gone in, say, to a PRU, but they've remained on the school row of the school, and there's been a blended curriculum, and that's something we can work together, and I'm happy to explore that. I'm sure Marie Rooney, my colleague, will work alongside me in exploring that, but I think that's a very good idea at certain points of that child's journey. So thank
you, because the dual registration I was talking about, the dual registration I was talking about was with Brooke, and the child spent I think 3 days in Avon Valley and 2 in Brooke. So it wasn't just dual registration on paper, they were really physically across the 2 buildings, and that worked well.
That's fine, but I think for me, if you've got that ratio, where's that child's needs best met? Is that special or mainstream? So I think for me, in terms of Brooke, you would be on a special needs school role there, not on a mainstream school role. And therefore, you know, I want to be clear, if we do dual registration, we need principles in which we all operate, not just pop up dual registration. It has to be part of a wider strategy.
Yes, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Thank
But
you.
Again, yeah, we'll work on that, and happy for you to join anywhere else to work on it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rose Gunn, please.
Hello, thank you. Just following a little bit on from that, I absolutely agree that you know, and I instill upon people this could be your child, and how would you feel if this was your child, and what you would want, and absolutely agree that you cannot wait until a diagnosis. You have to put all the measures in to begin with. The challenge has definitely been around COVID in seeking support for a group of children. This week, when I contacted Sendar, the response was, "Well, talk to your EP and talk to STS." I've already involved them, and the issue I've now got, and I have to think about everybody, and I do think about children first, is I've now got staff going off ill because they're not coping, emotionally not coping with the stress of the behaviour as a result of undiagnosed and diagnosed ASD. So I'm looking for support, I'm looking for the training, but I can't access it. I've approached a special school down the road and said, could you offer me, could you come, you're doing this all the time, could you come to us and show us what we should be doing? So I'm concerned from a financial point of view, because it does have an impact. I'm now having to get supply in, but also how do we get our hands on that training and support? But you know, I know you've just had the report that's only just been released, and you know, only a short amount of time has passed. So I'm up for that, because I believe in getting it right for the children, because that could be your child, and these are other people's babies, for want of a better word. So I believe in getting it right, but I'm not seeing that wealth. When I was writing my email to Sendar, I put in it, I didn't have a professional from STS or EP in from March 2020 until June 21. Didn't set foot in the building.
So
I know it's COVID, but we were all in here working and trying to work with the children, and now those children's needs have escalated because I couldn't get things moving then.
And I hear what you're saying, and you know, without, you know, at the end of the day, none of the services we had were shut down during the inspection, and I think we need to be clarity of roles here. Sendar is not the team that would come in to support. Sendar are the processing team for a needs assessment. Again, what we do need to make sure is the specialist teaching service. So they are right, the specialist teaching service, the EP service. What I am looking at is actually what can we offer all schools as co-offer. Yeah. So if we are being told by Ofsted and Quality Care Commission that schools are lacking in skills and knowledge and understanding, then how can we do it together to make sure that we can share those skills and enable school leaders and school staff to have that? Part of what I'm looking at, to be honest, at the moment, is what is in traded at the moment and what is it we deliver free of charge. And, you know, I will be taking this to Cabinet, because what I want to make sure is that what is in core and free of charge available for all is the right thing, gives the right impact, and upskills the workforce. Yeah. To be able to do that, I have to have school leaders willing to release their staff for the day to have that free of charge training. And this is where I want to bring a paper to the Schools Forum that, if, you know, in the next time, is to say, okay, how can you support me, or to give money to your schools, yeah, to release your staff so I can give you that free training, support and guidance. So I am absolutely looking, and I hear what you're saying, yeah, because if you need my support, I should be able to have the tools to give that to you. So I am looking at the traded model, yeah, what are we trading? And I am looking at, you know, what is ordinarily available in a co-offer and whether we've overtraded or not. In saying that, this past year, and obviously, you know, we have worked tirelessly within the council over the past year in terms of developing the change programme. We have developed a guidance that's going live now, co-produced guidance that's come from our EPs. You know, we are coming in and doing a pilot now in the next few weeks. We've got projects, and which Ross will talk about in a minute, about funding, how we can get that funded out to you early, you know, or even give you through training and what have you. So I do hear what you're saying. Unfortunately, we have had COVID. There was strict guidance, and what I will say to about the teams, you know, I've had some of my teams camping out in caravans so they could deliver training to schools, or they could support children, especially the clinical, extremely vulnerable. Our special schools did not shut down at all through COVID, and you know, our attendance rate as a county was, you know, you know, the best. We had 85% of our children in one of our special schools. So, you know, our most vulnerable children we had there, and we only worked within the risk assessments as well, and within your risk assessments and what we could. And where we could deliver virtually, we did deliver. So, you know, let's have a chat outside here, because perhaps it's not the right forum to have a more detailed conversation. But, you know, I believe you know, just want to do the best for the children and for the school leaders.
And you're right. I get it. I sent an email out to Sendar and the EP service, and it was just disappointing that the response, well, you need to talk to EP and SCS. I'm going, please help me. And so it's just knowing that we're up for that training and support. And you're right, you know, like I think Faye mentioned already, we're doing, you know, the AET training with STS with regards to autism, but day to day practically, when my other concern is staff are going off ill because they are exhausted from the behaviour. I have one teacher in a class of 30 and there's 3 of them with autism and things are flying across the classroom. I don't want to exclude. I don't, because I believe, as you said, exactly as you say, Dwayne, they have an entitlement. But my staff are, you know, we're only so many weeks and I've lost 2 teachers already.
You got my number. I'm going to move on, but you got my email address. Give us a call and let's have a chat to see what we can do work together. Chair, I don't know if you want to go to Ross to the second part so we can tell you what we have been doing in the last 18 months with the change programme.
Yeah, okay, Ross.
Thanks, Chair. There's so in item 7, the papers there in terms of the Send Inclusion Change Programme. As we've said before, we've combined a couple. It's a list of 30 projects now rather than 31. 15 are live. A whole range of things. I haven't given the full update there, but in terms of what we're contributing to, a number of those projects kind of converge across the same thing. And one of the things we do focus on in particular is where the placement of the child is, whether that is in mainstream, special or independent specialist. And just to say kind of background, and I'm happy to do a kind of wider presentation on this, which I've done to a number of groups before. The reason why we do that is just to have from a financial point of view, that the average top up in a mainstream school is £9,000. Add that to the 6,000 expected, is about £15,000 of support. I'll speak about that a little bit more in the next paper about because that's one of our projects to review what that is. But about £15,000 in a mainstream school is usually the support that's put in financially. That comes from the high needs block. If you're in a special school, depending on which one it is and what the needs are, if we include there's place funding of £10,000 and a top up, which goes anywhere from 0 up to £22,000. So you're talking about up to £32,000 in one of our state funded special schools. And then once you're in an independent special school, it's £53,000 plus. So you can see those kind of those stages as we go up. And keen observers might have identified in item 6 that actually when you looked at the breakdown of the spend, the kind of budget and the forecast were very much out from each other. And the reason why is one of the things we try to do is kind of right size what we would like those budgets to be, so we know that the budget which pays for independent specialist provision will be overspent on what we're trying to get it to be, but we've kind of put in what we would hope it to be in the future. So in terms of the activity that we've seen and the impact so far, we have seen the numbers and percentage of children in independent specialist provision reducing. This is really significant. So if I'm coming here in 2015, it was 10% of those with EHC plans were in specialist provision. We're now down to 5.5%. That's now 0.5% above the national average. But I've been at Schools Forum before where we've been kind of 2, 3, 4% above Schools Forum, and that's been pinpointed as the issue that we need to address. We still think that we're above national average. That's still something we want to address. And as I just mentioned, when you've got an average of about 53,000 a place, I've put in the numbers there. We're 189 placed in ISP at school age at the start of this September. going back, it's the lowest it's been in previous years has been kind of 201 at this stage. It's usually been between kind of 200 and 210. Well, actually, those 12 places are roughly about £600,000 as a financial saving in itself in terms of the management of the block. And again, we're still an outlier on that in placing too many children in independent specialist provision. In terms of the next one I've drawn to on page 3 and B is the numbers attending specialist resource provision. This chimes it's not a dual placement, but it's similar. I think Phil, you mentioned, could there be a time when you're with a special school for a term and come back? When we did our consultation on our SEND inclusion strategy a few years ago, one of the things we looked at was resource provision, this bridge between mainstream and special, where you get specialist teaching on site within a mainstream setting. We've approached that with 2 different models. One of those models is they're on the mainstream school role. They're supported by mainstream teachers, but there's a discrete area which can be used on site for some of the teaching, and it's intended that it's kind of integrated with the rest of the school when appropriate. So we've been creating those places. We've been using capital spend to actually build in a number of our. It's been in primary settings. We also had the second model around that, which I've also included in these numbers in resource provision, something called specialist partnerships, and that's where the child is on the role of the special school, but they attend the mainstream school. They're taught by a special school teacher, and we see this. We've got one between Brook and Harris School called the Junction in Rugby. We've just opened a new setting. It's just for six children, but it's between Coleshill and Woodland School, who are just around the corner from each other in Coleshill. It's called the Map. I believe one of the first year. There are 3 young people who have started there straight away in September, and one of those actually gave it the name. But in terms of creating this provision that actually allows for that kind of a child not to go straight to into a special school, but actually kind of a bridge between those mainstream and specialists. So we now have 140 places created. When I was reporting previously, we were using it. We had about 90 places available. Sorry, we had about 100 places available, and 69 were being used. We've now increased the utilisation. We're up to 90. We've created more places though, so we've still got those to fill, and we think that's improving. We asked for a graduated response in our classrooms to meeting special educational needs. This is almost a graduated response of the provision that we have, and if looking at the data, we're an outlier in this as well. So we have just under 2% of children with EHC plans are in this type of provision. Nationally, it's at least 4%. So that's why we've continued to expand our resource provision and our specialist partnerships. There is one of our projects is looking at capital funding. We're going. I think Angela's dropped off the call, but Angela from Welcome Hills is on the is on that group. And one of the things we're identifying is we're taking into account the population growth coming up, the changing of needs, and we're looking to see where's our kind of priorities for capital spend, where can we increase this provision further. And we know that particularly secondary resource provision is something that we don't have. So we have Trinity School in the centre of the county, have 20 places for communication and interaction needs. We've got those 2 settings, those 2 specialist partnerships, Brook and Harris doing one partnership, and Coleshill and Woodlands a second one. But we're looking for more partnerships to be set up, and we've got now the data behind us to begin to prioritise that through one of our projects. C on page 3 shows the direction of travel in terms of we have got more children in mainstream settings than two years ago. And just to say, we talk it in very general terms sometimes, and Alison's given examples of when it may have been appropriate to be in specialist provision, but we do know we are an outlier as a county. We have about 9% less children in mainstream school than other areas comparatively, and in doing so, we have been more robust in our decisions. And one of the things we are going back to schools is to say, what would it take? What would it take to support this child in their local mainstream school, and try and have a good kind of conversation and dialogue regarding that. There's also good evidence. See our SEND inclusion strategy. There's good academic-based evidence that actually more positive outcomes and life chances come from being educated alongside your peers in mainstream settings. The number of children in state-funded settings, which is D on there, has gone up, and this is the one which is kind of caught in the middle, if you like. So we've been trying to, as a strategy, have less people in specialist settings overall, but as we move down from if we create room in mainstream and in resource provisions, that should allow actually the use of our state-funded specialist settings. So there's kind of in a sense they're losing children on one hand, but gaining from those who have been attending independent specialist provision just because our special schools have been full. Okay, so there's kind of they're losing some and gaining on the other. So it's I think we're expecting kind of a net gain overall, and you can see that there. On E, we've seen that the growth in EHC plans has actually reduced. This is always a difficult and perhaps controversial one from those speaking with a financial kind of say, you know, we need to control how many children have EHC plans. I'm sure those in the classroom would say that some of our children need those EHC plans in order to gain the resources and make sure we can meet the needs of the children in our schools. It's reduced, so the number has increased, but the number increased by 6.1% last year in terms of the total caseload. The number of new HCC plans was 4.1%. That is lower than other areas, and it was what we said we would do in the in our DSG recovery plan. We said we would look at that, and I know schools have challenges because I pick up a number of conversations about them where we do go back and say we want to see more evidence. We want to see more evidence of the graduated approach in schools, but we have still issued more EHC plans than we did in the previous year, but that growth has slowed. I've mentioned in here I've got the number of EHC plans in preschool years remains slow, and Dwayne mentioned that this is one of those for us an invest to save. We do think we should have more EHC plans in early years, and that should lead to better preparation into primary school. We haven't seen that yet. We saw this year what we've seen in previous years, which is a kind of a flow of requests for EHC plans in the summer term just before going into reception year, and we're doing some work with the key services involved. Dwayne said it was picked up in the Ofsted inspection as well about that 0 to 5 pathway and how we work. So that's still an area we need to work on. And note that whilst the number of residential placements has reduced, sorry, I'll get the wrong way around. The unit price of residential placements has reduced in terms of our contracting, but actually the number of placements has increased into an overall increase in that budget. We've moved around some of the cost centres and able to enable ourselves to monitor spend better. Unfortunately, due to COVID, our supported internships work has been put back. That's significant for us as well, and that's looking very much at the other end of the spectrum at post-16, saying what, particularly once we've put in so many years of specialist provision, how do we help young people to actually move on to the next stage of their life, to move into employment? It is a real win-win for everyone. It's a positive outcome when we can see our young people move into employment. There's some great stories I can tell, but they're individuals at the moment, and unfortunately, a number of supporting internships reduced to 20 last year. The financial benefit from that will be that actually EHC plans will end earlier. They won't necessarily go all the way up to the age 25, but the life chances way outstrip that in terms of actually setting up our young people to be independent as they move forward. I'm picking up the top-up funding on the next item, which we'll probably run into fairly smoothly, hopefully. But that shows a lot of the work that we've been doing. Overall, you'll have picked up from item 6 as well. There is still an overspend of £4.9 million. It's less than what was previously forecast, which was £7 million when we started the programme. That's not just the impact of this. There has been an uplift from national funding as well. We think we're beginning to turn a corner. We're doing more analysis in terms of exactly which bits are leading to these overall kind of outcomes. But you can see how the kind of the profile is changing, and therefore our spend is changing as well. I'll pause there, Phil, if that's okay. I've gone on for quite some time.
That was it's a very comprehensive report and a very comprehensive presentation. I think you've probably stunned everybody into silence. So let's just see. Are there any questions or comments for Ross? A lot to digest there, but obviously a lot of good work going on, and you know, the overspend on high needs block is going to take that tank is going to take some time to turn around, isn't it? We're obviously making some progress. Okay, do you want to segue then into item 8 then, Ross?
Yeah, I will do, because one of the things I mentioned there was the average top up in schools is £9,000. There may well be some schools thinking that's not what I get as a top up. We have two bands in our mainstream schools, band C and D, which are used. One is just over £3,000 and one is just over £8,000. And I guess you know, it's clearly not fit for purpose if our average top up is above our highest band. Those bands haven't been increased for a number of years, and we started the project looking at, you know, how can we make sure the allocation funding system is better, and particularly as we've been through this, as we've done what we call our kind of as is process. We've had a number of interviews. I know there's a number on the group today who've had those interviews, and a real frustration. Sometimes the frustration is with the level of funding. Often the frustration is the number of hoops jumped through to get to the level of funding that they have. So often it's been approved as a band C, and then it's been increased to a band D, and then what we call a costed IEP, a costed individual education plan, has been put in. So I couldn't believe the amount of frustration that came back from heads and Senkos about the costed IEP, feeling frustrated of not knowing what they could and couldn't put in that costed IEP, not knowing the kind of guidance when to do it. What there is a template, but could they use a different template and so forth. At the same time, there's also some frustration from our special schools in the limits of the special school matrix that we have. So special schools are funded on a different funding matrix, which was agreed in 2016. It was better than what came before, but they're saying actually those needs have changed even since 2016, and we need to improve it further. What we've agreed as a subgroup, I think there's three or four on the call who are on that subgroup. We've agreed to trial 2 new methods to over the next year as allocation systems. In terms of what we're trying to achieve, one of the main things we're trying to achieve is to release resources quicker, so to stop those hoops that I mentioned. So it may not be that a school gets more, it's possible that a school may get less, but it's to make sure that their process is smoother and resources are released. Those resources should match what's in the EHC plan as well. That's our legal document to match to. It may well be that that some schools get more, and I think as Dwayne and I do kind of when we look at those mainstream allocations, we do think it's on the low side, and I gave to you those figures earlier saying, you know, 15,000 spent in mainstream, up to 53 in independent specialist provision. Well, overall you can see that if we spent 19,000 pounds as an average in mainstream, but we had less in independent specialist provision, we'd have a far more financially balanced system as well, when I'm sure our mainstream colleagues would welcome that extra kind of extra support. Those decisions are made on a kind of case by case basis, but the two models that we're looking at, one is like an extension of the current special school matrix. So essentially there'll be a grid with different types of needs and different levels of those needs, and in implementing this, you'll be asked to kind of identify where on that grid a child is, and that will have a value assigned to it. And in doing so, what we hope to be is a bit more targeted. You know, one conversation often has, we've kind of mentioned social emotional mental health needs already on this call, and in doing so, you know, that's often categorized as one need, but there's a whole range of different needs within there. You know, that covers a whole different range of behaviors and needs within it. So can we have something, kind of funding system which is a bit more targeted to what our young people need and our schools need to support them? The second method that we have is very much, it's like a calculator essentially, which is it will go back to the EHC plan. One of our projects which is already closed has been to improve the quality of our EHC plans. that's now passed. Just because it's closed doesn't mean it's done. That's a work in progress, but we've done the work. We've set up our quality assurance framework for EHC plans, and one of the things we want to do is really be quantifiable in those. How many, if support's coming from a speech and language therapist, how many sessions a week or a term is that? And the calculator kind of says we can look at if it's 2 sessions a week or 3 sessions a term or whatever it might be. You almost put in those unit costs and you build it up in that way and build up what the costs are to deliver that support. So they're the 2 allocation systems that we're looking with. We've looked in terms of who we're going to run them with. We've got 20 schools that have expressed an interest in doing so, or 22, I think, in doing so. And we're presenting back on a bit more of the detail on Monday. I can see Nikki's just come onto my screen. She's part of that group that we'll be presenting to on Monday to show where we've got to. We're looking to begin to trial that this term, if we can, and that'll be until the end of the academic year, and evaluate, have we released resources quicker? Have they been adequate? Have they kind of matched what's in the EHC plan? And the intention is that after sampling with those 2 groups, and we'll sample it with not everyone in those schools, we'll sample it with new EHC plans or amended EHC plans where there's been significant change. So we'll sample it on a kind of child by child basis. We know where the new plans are about to be issued. We're in that 20-week process, and we'll work with those schools and settings, and we'll come back to Schools Forum with their feedback later on in the school towards the end of the school year. And hopefully be able to recommend one that we take forward for the future. That's the intention. We're desperate to make sure that we don't test 2 things and come back and say neither of them have worked. But I think everyone on the group certainly is agreed that the current allocation system isn't appropriate, and so these are the 2 that we're testing. I'll pause there, Phil.
Thank you, Ross. I think you probably need a drink of water now. Right, Nikki, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think just as a Schools Forum member on that panel and on that group, I just wanted to share the amount of hours and the thorough and detailed workload that is going into that group. It really is. It's not being brushed over at all. And I know, Faye, you talked about the essence of the child, and the individual child is the essence of all the discussions we're having in that group. So I thought that'd be useful to hear from a Schools Forum member.
Thanks, Nikki. That is useful.
Yeah, thank you very much for that feedback. Okay.
Thanks. If I could just add, when I talk to Schools Forum, I do have to focus very much on the finances. That's the angle that we're taking on here, because that's where we have to focus. So thank you, Nikki, to assure people in our wider discussions we do the whole needs of the child.
Thank you. Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Dwayne. That's covered those agenda items. Have we got any comments? Any further comments? Thank you very much. A lot of good work going on there. Look for further feedbacks at future meetings. Thank you. Right, item 9 is Academy update. Neil?
Yes, thank you, Phil. I'm just going to pick up the main points of the report. So since the last report we had in March, there's been 7 further maintained schools that have converted from ACAD to Academy, and they are listed at 2.2. As you know, we only have 1 maintained secondary school, and now we have that almost 46% of maintained schools have converted to Academy at the primary phase. Again, I think the interesting point is the 123 primary schools that we still have, 54 of those are faith schools, and they tend to be our small rural schools. And then it's just a case of listing the Academy trusts and how many schools they have, when academies have converted year by year, and then in the appendixes is the complete list of academies and they're sponsoring that. And as always, Phil, happy to take any questions.
Okay, I think that's fairly straightforward and self-explanatory. Any comments or questions? Okay, item 10 is the additional item on the national funding formula. This is you again, Neil.
Yes, so I only circulated this yesterday. It actually got missed off the original agenda. So this is a report we do each year, so just outlines the national funding formula and budget setting timetable. I mean, at the moment, we do work towards a steady state based on both Schools Forum and Warwickshire councillors agreeing to move to the hard national funding formula when it first came into effect in 2018-19. As you know, we will be discussing all the schools block in more detail at the January meeting once more information crystallises over the autumn. I wanted to pick up on the national funding formula consultation, which I raised at the June meeting. This did actually come out on the 8th of July, entitled Fair Schools Funding for All, Complete Our Reforms to the National Funding Formula. The thrust of this report is suggesting that schools continue to move to the hard national funding formula, and this is in line with both Schools Forum and Warwickshire councillors' approach. Provisional modelling would suggest that the estimated funding for this year, and it is only provisional at this stage, we won't know what the final funding is until about the first week before December, and that's after the school's October census data. But at this stage, it is suggesting that we will be able to continue the hard national funding formula in 22-23, and there is potentially some surplus, but at this stage we don't know what that will be. Earlier in the year, the SFA consulted on sparsity funding, and they have confirmed that they will be funding sparsity money next year based on road distance rather than as the crow flies. And as Schools Forum will know, that is something that we actually implemented through a disapplication to the SFA this year. So we actually managed to get £45,000 to 9 small schools that were not deemed to be rural schools because of their distance to the next nearest school. We are looking at potentially consulting with schools, which will come back to Schools Forum in November on moving up to 0.5% of the schools block to the high needs block. But this is subject to affordability. Schools Forums probably remember that we had quite a pressure last year when we saw the uptake of free school meals between the January 2019 census point, which is the point whereby the SFA calculate how much money they think each local authority needs, and actually the October 2020 census. So in the space of 10 months, we saw a 28% uptake of free school meals, and that was mainly due to COVID-19. And then I have the appendix, which just summarises the key dates in the national funding formula and budget setting timetable. As I said, we are proposing to go out to consultation on moving up to the 0.5% from the school block, the high needs block. That consultation will run through till the 5th of November, and then come back to a provisional meeting on the 19th of November. But happy to take any questions, Phil.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens to the free school meals claims at the end of furlough and all the other changes that are about to take place, won't it?
Yes.
Okay. Any comments or questions on that for Neil? Is it likely that we'll be meeting on the 11th of November then?
Is the 11th? Yes, I think there is a chance that we will be meeting on the 11th of November, because high needs colleagues are intending to put out a consultation document to schools to make that transfer. So I'll be setting up a meeting date shortly, but it's been on the forward plan now for several months.
Okay, well, do you just want to just segue into item 12 then and talk briefly about the forward plan?
Yeah, so you have the forward plan. So at the moment, I've only got meetings up to June of next year. I'm still waiting for cabinet dates to be set because they're also on a Thursday afternoon, and we have had problems of clashing diaries for previous meetings. I just want to avoid that in future. So we do have the Thursday 11th of November meeting on there as provisional, but I'll set that up as a meeting shortly.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't have any chair's business, so I think that concludes today's business.
Has Martin got his hand up?
Before we go.
Oh yeah, just a quick one. When are the elections to the Schools Forum?
The elections to the Schools Forum, I need to check it. I think because we had the delay because of COVID, Schools Forum didn't sit. There was a delay in when Schools Forum sit from memory. I need to check this, Martin. I think we allowed Schools Forum membership to run for 2.5 years rather than 2. But let me just double check that, because it is in our terms of reference. I just can't remember the exact date. I'm
that's
sorry,
fine. It's just that it might be desirable, if feasible, for the elections to be held straight reported when we have a real meeting in June.
Yes, I mean that we're definitely going to have the election of the chair and vice chair in the June meeting.
Yeah, all right, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Kevin Griffiths, please.
Just to check on the forward plan, there isn't Thursday the 24th of June. I presume you mean Thursday the 23rd of June. Is that correct?
Probably. If there isn't a 24th, it'd be the 23rd.
You've not invented another leap year, Neil, have you?
No.
A long time ago, I was born on a Thursday, the 23rd of June.
Well, you would know then.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Just to confirm, Phil. Yeah, the elections will take place in May 22, ready for the June meeting.
Right.
So it will be next year.
Okay. I think that's everything then. So I will thank everyone for their participation, and put the meetings in the diary, and we'll hopefully see you on the 11th of November. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.